I think your story touches on almost everything that our listeners will feel.
The SaaS project that actually took off, it's called HelpKit. And like my numbers all the way up to $10,000 in MRR.
Here you have this story of crazy success of this website going viral.
HelpKit now has over 400 customers.
Where your customers tend to hang out,
I knew people want help centers.
What are some of the pivots or iterations you made along the way?
Saw so many competitors popping up, literally copycatting my entire landing page.
I love talking pricing, especially when it comes to monthly recurring revenue type products.
Pricing is very much value-based.
How did you land on the monthly price versus a yearly price?
Like there's a bit of pricing psychology and like using nicer looking numbers.
That's the really tough part, is finding the first set of customers. Like
I spent days just cold emailing people. The one thing that a lot of startups lack, especially in the beginning.
All right, welcome back to the Niche Pursuits podcast. My name is Jared Bauman. Today we're joined by Dominik Sobe. Dominik, welcome on board.
Thanks for having me, Jared.
It's great to have you. This is another one of those interviews. For those of you who are listening and don't know, sometimes the time zones, they just don't work out in our favor. I'm up early, you're up late. We're making this thing work. I'm really excited to have you on board. It's fun because there are so many different things we could go into. You're involved in a lot of different projects. We've actually featured one of your websites on the Weird Niche segment of the news podcast. But that's probably really not what we're going to be talking the most about today. We're going to be talking about some of the other things that you're working on. Before we get into all that, though, as we like to do, maybe give us some backstory on who you are and tell us maybe some of the things that led up to you doing what you're doing today online.
Yeah, sure. First of all, thanks for having me. Good morning. I know it's been very, very early for you, so I appreciate you waking up as well. Accompanying kind of like my time zone. For me, it's like 9:30 in the evening. I think for you, it's like 6:30 in the morning. So Good morning. I'm Dom. I'm originally from Austria, but have been traveling around the world as a, I guess, quote unquote, digital nomad now for the past almost 6 years. And I've always really been into I've been really into business and economics very early on in my kind of, I guess, study career, but making like software products was never really on my mind. I'm a self-taught developer. I taught myself how to code. I never really did any sort of like actual university courses or anything. I just sort of randomly stumbled into coding because I wanted to make a little mobile app for myself for like a use case that I had. And basically just teaching myself how to code as a little thing on the side while I was bored, just studying business and economics, actually got me into coding. And from there on, it's interesting. It's really cool that we are talking now on this niche pursuit kind of podcast, because actually the reason why I got into like making my own products and actually making money on the internet was because like super randomly, I stumbled on this story from my mom's friend like 8 years ago who was basically, so I'm from Austria, this small village. Not a lot of people know about it. And there was this woman who supposedly was making a living by writing about espresso machines online. So she had a review site. She was writing about espresso machines, and I couldn't believe it. My mom told me, yeah, she's somehow making money. And I was like, how does that work? And then I slowly got into this whole idea of like, there's an affiliate system, and she's just basically promoting these really high ticket espresso machines that cost like thousands of dollars. So actually it's possible for her to sort of make a living with these reviews. And I heard about this and I could not believe it. I thought people need to go to this typical office work, have to be there like 24/7, 7 days a week to actually make a living. And then she's there in our village and making sort of like already good money with this niche site. And that's actually what really got me motivated as well. And that was basically the spark.
This episode is brought to you by Ahrefs. If your content team is drowning in outlines, research, and SEO checklists, well, meet your new favorite tool. Ahrefs AI Content Helper streamlines your entire workflow. It uses real SEO data to guide your content before you even start writing, so you can create more high-quality articles, cover more topics, and even reach a bigger audience. It's not about writing for you. It's about helping your team think smarter, faster, and rank higher. You can learn more at ahrefs.com. That's ahrefs.com. All right, now back to the episode.
And then a lot of things happened. And eventually I stumbled on a lot of indie hackers. For those of you who are listening who maybe don't know, probably most of you already know, but it's just people that are comfortable with bootstrapping their own software products. They don't really rely on external funding. They rather want to wear all the hats that you usually have like a lot of employees for, but do it themselves. And I was really intrigued by this idea. And so I was just basically looking for ideas for a while, what I could build to basically make a living out of it and don't ever have to get a quote unquote, I guess, normal job. And over the years, I launched a lot of things, and a lot of them were actually not successful. I also did like a little hobby project. One of them we can talk about later, which is basically right now it's the largest database for photographic analog film. And that was something that was really interesting to me, and never really fully succeeded in terms of monetary value. But then eventually I started getting more into the whole software as a service kind of niche, because I was trying to solve my problem of creating a help center website for this one mobile app that I was creating earlier. This little app that I built, I needed a website or a help center for the App Store. And I realized that I really hate to have some sort of like to use some sort of help center software. And then I used basically Notion, which back then already existed, for my help center content. And that kind of sparked an idea of what if I could use Notion, which has this amazing editor, and create some sort of like much more professional help center side out of it. And that kind of trickled into the SaaS project that actually took off. It's called HelpKit, and it's basically a tool that allows you to create like documentation or help center websites based on Notion as an editor. And that's basically like, I guess, like my short story, how I got to the point where I am right now. And yeah, it's been great. I've been traveling around the world now for the past 5 years, and slowly I'm realizing I need to settle a bit. But yeah, I hope I have some things to share. So yeah.
I think your story almost touches on almost everything that our listeners will feel, right? Like a lot of us long to start a product online, to start something online. A lot of us have dabbled in the niche site space. A lot of us have had a lot of failed projects. And then a lot of us, the project that ends up landing isn't the one that we really thought was going to be the one that landed, you know? And so I love that story. I'm excited to have you here. And to your point, like we could talk about so many different things. Let's start with HelpKit, because it is the project I know that kind of is the flagship for you right now. It's kind of built on this. People can go to it. It's helpkit.so if people want to look at it and have it up while they're listening and stuff. It's a really nice website. Maybe you told us about the startup process for it and how you came about the idea. Maybe tell us about where it's at now. Who's your customer base? Who's using it? And any kind of numbers or figures you're comfortable sharing about where it's at today.
Yeah, sure. So HelpKit is a fully self-service SaaS business. When I say we, it's just me, but sometimes I just fall into the kind of like the thing, because HelpKit grew to quite some size. HelpKit now has over 400 customers. Some really like big, large enterprise customers. HelpKit has some universities all over to like software companies that you probably have heard of, to smaller startups, SMBs, you name it. Like HelpKit basically runs like per month hundreds of thousands of like page views for users. HelpKit's MRR, so basically I'm a big proponent of build in public. For those of you who don't know about it, it's basically sharing all of your numbers super transparently. And if you go back to my Twitter, you can see me sharing like my numbers all the way up to $10,000 in MRR, which is kind of like the ceiling where I stopped sharing my MRR, for the plain reason that while I really saw a lot of benefit by being so transparent up into kind of that range, I sort of stopped feeling like I felt like that me just sharing numbers felt a bit more bragging rather than actually providing enough value. And there were a lot of people on Twitter back at that time that I feel like were just engagement farming, just sharing the numbers all of the time to get engagement. And to me, I felt like at like 10K MRR, I had also to stop, because the amount of sort of copycats that were just coming up and trying to like take a bite, but in a way that, like, the thing with competition that I learned kind of the hard way is that you really need to like almost completely ignore your competition, because most of the competitors that will pop up will basically disappear in like weeks, maybe months. None of them will stick for even a year. However, back when I was at that 10K MRR range, I saw so many competitors popping up, literally
Yeah.
copycatting my entire landing page. And it kind of freaked me out. I feel like I'm much more mature right now, like talking about it, because it's kind of ridiculous. But I thought like, oh my God, I'm sharing all my numbers and they're all copying me because of that. And to some extent, they probably have been. But I could have I guess continued sharing the numbers, but like at one point I just felt like there was not enough. I felt more bragging, if that makes any sense. But so yeah, HelpKit is, if that makes any sense, above 10K MRR. We have around 400 customers. So if you really want to, you can do a bit of math yourself, anyways. Um, but yeah, that's basically the numbers. And yeah.
Well, I mean, to be able to take a startup, a SaaS like you have, and get it to 400 customers, and you mentioned MRR, so monthly recurring revenue. So it's a, that's the beauty about SaaS, is that oftentimes it's going to be something where once a customer signs up, assuming you have a product that's sticky, they'll stick around for a while. They'll continue to pay a monthly amount. Let's talk about where you found your first customers. I think that's, for a lot of people, launching an idea, that's the really tough part, is finding the first set of customers. Like, how did you go about finding customers for this, maybe up to the 10K mark, those first dozen customers or so?
Yeah, great question. I love this question because I think it's basically the holy grail, right? Everyone wants to know, how do you get to the first $1,000 and how do you get to the first 5K, right? And I think, like, to me, the most important thing that a lot of listeners here probably have heard already a lot of times, but maybe are still not really actionable about it, and that is that you really need to get into that grind. And what I mean with this is that you need to do a lot of things that don't scale and be very manual. So in the beginning, I reached out to like dozens. I mean, back then I only had dozens of emails, but I had dozens of emails of people that I interacted with in the past. And I was like creating a handcrafted email to all of these people that I maybe built some small products for, whatever. And I reached out to them and I said, hey, I built this new tool. What do you think about it? And then it trickled down from that. I spent days just cold emailing people. And I tried to cold DM people. And in the beginning, that was really what it took, because I really had to, in the beginning for any product, you really need to fight for your customers. If you think you're building a product and people will just come, it just won't happen unless you get extremely lucky. And if that is the case, I mean, I'm happy for you, but I strongly believe that until you get to like, I don't know, like there's no real number, but if you like to your first 50 customers, you really got to wake up every morning and just try everything you can do to get one more customer, no matter what. Even if it takes you a day, hop on a demo call with them, like do whatever it takes. And that's also where you learn a lot about your product as well, because the one thing that a lot of startups lack, especially in the beginning, where you haven't really found your product market fit, is feedback. And it can be very easy just to like build a product at home in your little own cozy bubble and then never really talk to actually the users. And I get it. It's very comfortable to be in a position where you don't get harsh feedback, but that's actually where you need to get into. You need to get into the trenches. And I guess so that's like basically my my biggest, I guess, tip in that regard. However, there are some things that I think that are always working, especially when you're like bootstrapping a product. The first thing is building in public. I think it's an invaluable thing, which is basically just sharing everything you do online. I chose to pick Twitter or X as my platform because it felt like I felt like the most home there, and I actually made some friends, and it felt a bit like a community. I know people that use LinkedIn, for example, and especially if you're in the B2B niche, LinkedIn can be very, very valuable. Um, However, it comes with a specific cost of being on LinkedIn, which for some people is a bit unbearable. So I can get that as well. But for me, it was basically Twitter, and I was sharing everything I did, like every product update, every little like design change. I was sharing a screenshot of like, hey guys, what do you think? And now obviously you can argue that these little design like screenshots won't get like necessarily your first customer. However, what it does is it creates some sort of word of mouth, and there will be some person that sees your screenshot, and then they will talk to someone that might need a new help center in my case, you know. And so it really like I think in the beginning, just getting as much as exposure for your product, like you really need to have this shotgun principle, like be everywhere, be just everywhere in the first few weeks or months, and then you can like trim down and see what actually works. A lot of times you will see that if you reach like the 5K mark, actually just billing in public on Twitter won't, like, you won't get really like a lot of customers from that. It's more like a branding type of thing, and you build credibility. However, when you get to that, like, you know, the first 1K, just do cold emailing, build in public, spread your product everywhere, go on launch platforms, like go on Product Hunt. Now, we all know Product Hunt is not exactly what it used to be anymore. However, it's still a great platform. It has a high domain authority. You want to get some good backlinks for your product. And so you really just publish your product in every launch platform. Right now, there's obviously Product Hunt, but there are some really good new upcoming ones. One that comes to my mind is Unit.best. That's a new launch platform by a friend of mine, Thomas. It has, I think, a domain authority of over 60. So that's also really, really good. I've seen Tiny launch, and there's Tiny startups. So there's a few now. And I think being in these like launch platforms can also help to get your first customers as well and get the feedback. And moving on from there, I think one thing that helped me a lot as well, that ties into the building in public as well, is sharing my lessons. And primarily, I shared my lessons a lot on Reddit. So I would go in all of these subreddits like r/entrepreneur or r/startup, r/SaaS. And I would basically just, without promoting my product, just share my lessons. Like, hey, I got 20 new customers from this like marketing experiment. Here's what I learned. And then obviously I will in some shape or form talk about the name of my product. And so people that, and like because my product is very much oriented for founders and businesses that are hanging out on Reddit, it seemed like a really good, easy way for me to get into the minds of these people. So Reddit marketing actually helped me a lot in the beginning as well. I was just commenting my product in a subtle way under like, there are some like Reddit posts where people talk about like, what's the best help center software, right? And then there might be already quite a few like products being mentioned, but like there are some of these evergreen kind of Reddit questions that it's basically like parasite SEO, if you want to call it like that, where you can just promote your product and then you will get traffic from there as well, if you provide like an angle like why your product is better than the others, obviously. And so Reddit marketing definitely helped me a lot in the beginning as well. And maybe one more thing that I think primarily helped for HelpKit as well was the concept of engineering for marketing. There's a lot of words for this, but the idea is that you build like small free tools and you put them on your landing page on a subpath, so you get the SEO juice. And if I think that's the best strategy. However, sometimes maybe making your own little full new landing page can also be interesting. But I think building little tools, free helper tools for your audience, is also a really, really successful strategy, and that helped a lot for me. So just to give you an like example, one of the early things. So HelpKit is a tool that works based on the Notion editor, right? It pulls all the knowledge base data and the help center data from Notion. So that means that a lot of people all my customers are using Notion, right? And within Notion, for a long time, you could not have the option of using a simple database. Okay. So Notion has this concept of like a very complicated kind of database view, but that felt very like technical, and a lot of people really didn't want to use it. They just wanted to use a very simple table, and it didn't exist. However, there was a way to create a simple table, and that was by injecting some sort of code into the Notion editor. It's called LaTeX for the non-scientists here, it's just like a coding language for making like mathematical annotations. But one of the mathematical annotations is creating a table. So in order to create this table, though, you would need to actually know this code. It's very hard, very complicated, and like a lot of like finicky things to fiddle around. There was no ChatGPT, obviously, so you couldn't like just ask ChatGPT for this. So I built a generator where you have basically, it's like a landing page on my domain, helpkit.so/tools/simple Notion table generator. And I knew that people on Reddit were asking for this keyword as well. So on this landing page, I built a free tool where there's the user interface of a table, and you just type in whatever you want to have in that table. And then at the bottom, it spits out the code that you can paste into Notion. And then there you have it. You have your simple table. It looks beautiful. That's what you wanted. And that basically I then promoted very easily on Reddit and Facebook groups, because it wasn't like, it was a free tool. It wasn't necessarily HelpKit. It was just a free Notion tool that the community wanted anyway. But that obviously kind of sneaked in the word of mouth for HelpKit, because it's on the HelpKit landing page, and on the very bottom I had a very big CTA that said something like, oh, you're using Notion, does your company maybe need a help center that is already built on it? And then, that trickles down, and that also gave me quite a lot of customers. And so these little, like, building little free tools helps also a lot. And now these days with ChatGPT and all these like AI coding generators, you can like spin out generators like however much you want. I think it's important to have quality in there, because it's so easy these days. Everyone can spit out a generator or a calculator. So you need to stick out. But now is the golden age for this. If you want to get some good leads, I think free tools is still also the way to go.
I mean, you touched on so many amazing ideas for people listening to get started and to get traction. I'm not going to recap all of them, but there's so many good ideas there. One thing that really stood out to me, though, that I'll highlight, maybe use that to segue into the next question, is you did a really good job at some point understanding where your customers tend to hang out. You talked about knowing that your customer tends to be a founder. You talked about the certain Reddit threads they tend to hang out on, and then kind of being present there. I mean, it gets into the idea of product market fit, which you also mentioned. And how did you land on the right product market fit? I've got to imagine there's maybe some stories about what you initially launched HelpKit with versus where it's at now. Like, what are some of the pivots or iterations you made along the way that you didn't know going into it that now the product has?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think in the beginning, I was very much focused. Well, I think HelpKit's product market fit, how should I say this? So I think I will give you an analogy, a little story, because I think that kind of wraps around this really, really well. Before I was building HelpKit, I was building some other SaaS products. And the problem that I had with all these products is that they were all very hard to market. And what I mean with this is that it took a lot of time for me to first educate the market about the idea and then convince them that my tool is the way to solve it. And I was building like a app store previewer. It was like a website that helps you to preview how your app will look like on the Apple App Store, which is a very neat tool, but arguably not a lot of people will actually pay for it. But much more importantly, I would have to explain people first that it makes a lot of sense to first preview how your app will look like on the App Store before you submit it, maybe send it to your friends, get some feedback, or your colleagues. But like, I had to educate people that that's actually important, right? There was not a lot of people even thinking about it. So from that premise, I met a guy randomly on a boat cruise in Lisbon, and he was basically like, I was talking with him, kind of being depressed about my current stage of the product. It's not making a lot of money, yada, yada. And he looks at me and he said like, look, think about it this way. If you like, imagine you're on a river that goes from the big mountains, from a volcano down to the ocean, right? And what you want to do is you want to build a product where you basically are swimming with the current on this river down to the ocean, right? But what you're building right now is sort of the opposite. You're trying to build this product and you try to push upwards. You try to push against the current. In another analogy, you want to have the wind behind your sail, right? You don't want to have it the opposite way. And what it came down to is actually building on top of something that already has a bit of traction, something where there is already knowledge in the market. And by like, I already knew that there is a market for help center websites because every company needs an FAQ page or a knowledge base or help center, however you want to name it, right? Because you want to get your customers to first, hopefully, read all of the questions and answers first before they ever submit a ticket, because it's a pain in the butt to actually answer to support tickets. And so I knew that there's a market and there's been huge companies already being built on top of this, right? And so on top of that, Notion was just in the beginning, but getting a lot of traction. Now, when I started, it was a lot of students. It wasn't necessarily a lot of companies back then, which now completely changed. Like Notion is turning into like almost a Microsoft 365 alternative in that regard. So that also came in benefit for me. But the reason why like coming back to product market fit, I think the product market fit was pretty early on in that regard, that I knew people want help centers and I knew people are slowly adapting more and more to Notion, and they hate these very boring tools like all these like project management tools that felt very clunky, and Microsoft tools that were never really there, and like Google Docs wasn't really a solution. So all of that being said, is I think product market fit, in a way, you can like, it's very hard to engineer product market fit, but I think this like the premise of your idea kind of dictates already where you're heading, right? And so for me, in the very early on, people were actually really receptive to the idea. They said, holy shit, like I've been using Notion for other stuff. I'm just going to use this for my help center. It's a no-brainer. And that was actually really nice. And people were very, very open to this idea. Now, in the beginning, it took a bit of time to just also tell people that you can do this. I think that was like a bit of my challenge, like just telling people, hey, I know you use already Notion for your wiki, but for your company wiki or your internal employee documents, onboarding or whatever it is, SOPs, but you can also use it for a knowledge base. And for people to realize that, I just needed to do a lot of, like I said in the beginning, just, have the shotgun method of just like pushing the word out there. But because already Notion was getting traction, I was interacting with a lot of people on in the Notion community as well. We kind of pushed each other in a way. There was a guy that very early on became some sort of Notion influencer. And in the very beginning, I was like kind of just interacting with him. He had like 5,000 followers or something on Twitter. And he asked me if he can have HelpKit, if he can use HelpKit for his company. And I gave it to him for free because I was like, yeah, why not? And that mini gesture kind of turned into the fact that he kept posting about it when he was at like 200,000 followers on Twitter. So there is some sort of serendipity in that way as well. But circling back, I think it's just being in the niche, like being in a community. And the product itself definitely evolved over time with just all of the feedback that came in. But I would say that it was always quite a straightforward, like the roadmap was always pretty clear. There were maybe some features that people were missing. For example, in the very beginning, I didn't really have analytics, which was very sufficient for the very early versions. But eventually, if you want to run a professional help center, you need to have analytics into what is happening in your knowledge base. What are people searching for? What are they not searching for? And smartly telling people where their knowledge base is still a bit lacking. And so that is basically what evolved into it. And then down the line, people were more and more interested in having some sort of AI chatbot. So that was something that I naturally had to build, that I was actually quite against in the beginning, because I felt like that a lot of chatbots don't really fulfill what they should fulfill. And everyone listening knows that it's a really, really painful process if you go to a website and they only have an AI chat and it doesn't work, and then you get frustrated. And ideally, it's a slippery slope. Ideally, I think you still want to have these people read your knowledge base, but I get that
Yeah.
people are lazy and want to just ask a chatbot. But this chatbot needs to be so well done, and like LLMs are getting better every single day. But I think still with chatbots, it's kind of like the holy grail to get this really, really right. But all that being said, is I think the product market fit for HelpKit in that regard was always there. I think I really felt it at, I guess, like 5K MRR ish, where I wouldn't have to, like, be like, I could, for example, for 2 weeks just build a feature, don't do any marketing, but I would still get new customers.
Right.
And that was the moment where I would feel that there is product market fit. Like, there's these people saying you feel when there is product market fit, and I think it's true. It's some sort of latent thing. There's a feeling for it, if that makes any sense. But yeah.
I've got to imagine building in public also smoothed the process of product market fit, just because you're doing so much interaction with a community on a constant basis. That's you highlighted some of the downsides of building in public, which competition, but I think there's probably got to be some upside just in the fact that if you are where your where your customers are hanging out, and you're building in public, like, you're going to just naturally get feedback so much faster as well. So it's got to be an upside to that. Kind of in parallel, let me ask you about pricing. I love talking pricing, especially when it comes to monthly recurring revenue type products, because you really have to nail that pricing. Like, if you're selling a course, like, you can kind of, it's not a precise process, but with when you're talking SaaS and when you're talking MRR, like, you've really got to nail that pricing to have a consistent client base. Talk about how you landed on the pricing you're at now. And I mean, if any details you can share about which price points people kind of tend to land in, and just any insights people can get from that.
Yeah, sure. So I think pricing, as you mentioned, it's one of the most important things in the SaaS business. And I think it's also something that, ironically, a lot of founders kind of oversee. Sometimes they just stick with one pricing that they chose in the beginning for some gut feeling, and then never change it again, right? Which I don't even blame them, because it's very easy. If something works, it's very scary to change. That was also my position in the beginning. I think until I was at maybe until the first $3,000 ish MRR, I had a different pricing plan, right? HelpKit right now has a 3-tier pricing plan.
Right.
So there's sort of like a startup plan for $19. Then there's a bigger one for $39, and then the biggest one is $99 now. And arguably, if you look into the knowledge base section, like niche, HelpKit is still comparably cheap and affordable. However, the reason why the prices I sort of landed at is because in the beginning, I kind of saw HelpKit more as a plugin, as an addition to Notion, if that makes any sense. That was also why the pricing in the beginning was way cheap. I had 2 plans. It was $19 and $29, and that was it. And I very quickly, actually not me, it was like other people, other founders that talked to me, and then eventually told me, like, man, yes, theoretically, you're building on top of Notion as the editor, but these people are replacing their entire help center that they have been using with your help center. So there's only one help center in their company, meaning that the value that they derive is not tied to the fact that what they use in the background for the editor is what the value they get out of. And once I heard that, I was like, okay, wow, that is so true. I could charge way more. And I initially got a bit disincentivized to raise the prices too high, because I got some companies reaching out and say, oh, it's already so expensive, yada yada, which now, after all the experience that I learned in doing SaaS for 4 years, is that most of the time it's a great indicator that these people might just not be your customer, like your target customers that you want to serve.
Yep.
I think HelpKit's $19 plan, for example, is ridiculously cheap, but it is some sort for HelpKit, at least for now, it works pretty well because of the concept of expansion revenue, as in it's very easy to get them into the door and then have them basically upgrade. And keep customers upgrading within your product, which is obviously way easier than acquiring a new customer. So there is some sort of nuance in terms of your pricing that you need to figure out. I think one lesson that I can definitely share is that from all the SaaS businesses I've seen so far, especially if you're bootstrapped and want to do this as a solo founder, but even if you're just a small bootstrap team, um, I would highly suggest against having a free plan. And all freemium plans, I think, are made for VC backed models. If you have a lot of funding and you can waste a lot of money and deter the fact of finding out product market fit, because that's what it is. You never know if someone doesn't give you their credit card. So I think for SaaS businesses, especially in B2B, you gotta do a free trial. Of course, do a free trial. Either HelpKit does not have, so HelpKit has a 7-day free trial, no credit card ask upfront.
Okay.
There are some ideas you can play with, like asking for a credit card upfront, maybe extending the 7 days to 14 days. I've seen 21 days. However, I've recently read some studies that actually suggested that a 7-day period, even though it sounds aggressive, can be quite advantageous. I've seen a lot of help center software being in the 14-day range. I just like what I'm like wanting, like what I want to kind of conclude here is that a lot of these things are still a bit of gut feeling. I think you cannot come up with prices in a extremely like statistical, mathematical way, because it's just not true. Pricing is very much it's very much value based. That's how you should price your products in the first place, right? Because you can price it as in utility. How much does it cost you to run? And then you just add a little bit of a markup, right? That's how, commodity goods are priced. Your t-shirt is priced because, the cotton costs like 20 cents and then I need a bit of markup. However, with software products, completely different game. We're talking about much more like how much value does it provide? And that inherently is a gut feeling. And I think in the beginning, now I'm talking a lot of, I'm talking a lot of hypothetical here, as in how, like Dom, how do you pick a price in the beginning, right? That's like the holy grail question. And I think checking out your competitor pricing is important just to get a feeling, like if your competitors are pricing at like $40 a month and you come in with like 400, that's going to be hard. That's going to be tough. However, that being said, if you want to position yourself as a premium product and you charge 100 instead of 40, that could work. You just need to know your positioning, and you need to know, first of all, that there's always going to be people that that should see the value in your product. Like thinking that you should price your product as cheap as possible because you're too scared of charging more is kind of undervaluing what you're actually building. And it's something that you should always keep in mind. Like, never price your product too cheap, is what I'm saying. And you can always raise prices later. And in fact, raising prices is something that I did as well, and it just works. It's so ironic how actually raising your prices also increases your revenue. So much in like business also is some sort of gut feeling based, but it needs to be gut feeling based on some sort of
premise.
It needs data driven gut feeling based, if that makes sense. And I guess like what I learned with HelpKit as well is that in general, I think that's like something a lot of indie hackers can probably take away. Like, we always think in such a small scale. And that is like, I never thought that I would get a single customer that like HelpKit has a yearly plans, right? And if you do the math, I think it comes down to like almost $1,000 a year. If you would pick the highest plan and then it would be the yearly, it's $1,000, right? And I thought no company on earth will ever like wire me $1,000 up front for a product. Like, I just couldn't believe it, right? And then the first time it happened, I'm like, okay, interesting. That's insane. That okay. Then it happened a couple more times. I was like, okay, so clearly my assumptions of like how much money is like what are we talking here, right? And then I talked to some people in like large scale enterprise, software as a service, and they laughed their ass about it. They were like, man, like we have this like like $5,000 a month plan, and like companies should sign up, and there is money. So basically, what I'm saying is, don't be scared of charging money, because the scale that us people, especially like bootstrapped solo founders, think about is always way too small. And I always see this with job posting platforms. Like if you look at Peter Levels charging like $1,000 for a single job listing platform, you would think like, which company on earth would pay this amount of money? But they do. And for them, it's actually cheap, because the cost of acquisition of an employee is like way, way, way higher. So I think thinking about pricing in that way, that there's so much value to capture if you're building a nice, valuable product, is definitely an important takeaway. And maybe one more lesson to share in terms of pricing, because I think it's very important, is the concept of always basing your pricing on some sort of value metric. And what I mean by this is that you should always have a pricing that scales with the resources that your customers are using. For example, in HelpKit, the value metric that I chose is the amount of articles per plan. So if you're a small company, you have 20 articles. However, if you grow your knowledge base, you have the need for more content. Suddenly, you have to upgrade the plan because your company is expanding in that regard, right? And you can think about this as in team seats. How many employees are allowed to be on a plan, or how, like, if your product is more related to how much money they are making, right? That's the easiest value metric. If they go above a certain threshold, they have to go into a different plan. But importantly, or page views, you name it, like any sort of, you need one North Star metric that you can basically segment your customers in, because otherwise your customers will grow, but you won't get a piece of their growth. And that's actually like sort of the holy grail in SaaS businesses, is you want to grow with your customers. So yeah, that's also one really important lesson that I learned.
I want to ask you a couple of really specific questions around HelpKit. Let me stick with the pricing topic since we're in that right now and you're sharing so much. And I tend to ask SaaS people this a lot, but you've got a monthly, you've got a yearly option, right? You talked about people who are, out of the blue, they'll just show up and they'll send you the full year's worth for your SaaS. Like, what for you have you found to be the breakdown? How did you land on the monthly price versus the yearly price? Because I think a lot of people, almost like the freemium model you touched on, right? Like that's something that a lot of SaaS founders deal with and struggle with. Do I offer a freemium? How long do I make a trial? What are the details of the trial? Credit card, no credit card. But also when it comes to monthly versus yearly. And I'm just curious how many of your customers end up on either side of that decision.
Yeah, I mean, if you want, in my like heart broken down sort of guideline, I think if you're starting out a SaaS business in the B2B space, 7-day or 14-day trial, no freemium, go with the option of no credit card up front, and try to really focus on providing value in these first 7 or 14 days. And in terms of yearly and monthly, I think there's a very common way of like a lot of companies, they discount their yearly price by 20%, or in most cases you can also call it 2 months if you want to call it like that.
Yeah, it's like 16% or something in the end when you do.
Yeah. It's a good heuristic, 20% ish. That's a good amount. That's a good number. One thing I really like to do is also like making the numbers more beautiful. Like there's a bit of pricing psychology and like using nicer looking numbers. So I think I've seen a lot of like SaaS businesses in the beginning that just, they take the yearly fee, they discount 20%, and then they want to show, for example, the monthly price equivalent of that. But that will be some sort of, floating point number that looks really ugly and distracting. So what I always do is I try to make the monthly yearly price look very beautiful. And then for the sake of perhaps like giving 1% more discount, even though I claim it's 20%, it's maybe 21, if that makes sense. Having the numbers look nice for a psychology perspective also is something I always do. And I think also one thing that a lot of SaaS businesses, specifically also HelpKit, benefited a lot, that I focused on the past few months, is nudging people to upgrade to yearly. I think it's such an underrated thing of just like telling your customers you can actually save 20%. Like if you have a customer that has been with you for a year but is paying a monthly plan, it's almost a no-brainer to just nudge them to sign up for the yearly plan. Sometimes they just don't know, or they need just one little nudge extra. So for HelpKit, I think the distribution is definitely more on the monthly side, even though the LTV of HelpKit is extremely high. Like we have customers that stick for like 3 years already, more. Like it's the churn is really low. The LTV is extremely high. It's something, just I think in terms of companies just love to pay monthly because they think they have more flexibility. Sometimes I guess accounting based. I don't really know the specifics in that regard, but HelpKit definitely had, like, in terms of, because HelpKit now has 3 tiers. I think that's maybe also a lesson to take away, right? Always go for 3 tiers because then you have the anchoring effect. You always want to have a pretty expensive plan, I guess, and then the middle plan that you want most of your customers to choose, and then entry level plan that gets people into the door. So that's kind of like the idea that you would want to do. And but yeah, I think the majority of HelpKit customers definitely are on the middle plan. A lot of companies actually are also on the highest plan, which signals to me that I might still are underpricing these 2 plans in a way. Because I do see that, the distribution is definitely more on the upper level plans than the lower level plan. So there's definitely something in that regard that I can also work on a little bit still. But yeah, that's I guess like the pricing breakdown.
I love it. Yeah, you and I could we could do an entire podcast on just pricing, but for the sake of all the folks that didn't nerd out in economics at school, I'll have to move on. And I mean, we are coming to a bit of we are coming to the backside of the interview, but I want to make sure to touch on some of the other side projects you have. I mean, for those who are active listeners of the podcast, they might recognize Film Types, your website that was featured on the news segment. I don't know, probably 6 months ago, maybe less. You also have Red Reach, which is a kind of a newer project for you. Maybe just, I mean, we don't have a ton of time, but maybe spend a little bit of time telling us about some of these side projects and why you're working on them and why you can, put time into them.
Yeah, sure. So maybe just touch on Red Reach real quick, because I think it ties into the marketing aspect as well. The reason why, so Red Reach is basically a marketing tool for Reddit. And what it does is that, as a little backstory, a while ago, Google bought the access data to Reddit. So you've probably noticed that whenever you're Googling something, especially things with high intent, high purchase intent, Google highlights a lot of Reddit posts. So in the first 5 SERP results, you see a lot of Reddit posts being mentioned and suggested. And Google also uses these for their AI overviews now. So a lot of influence that Reddit content basically has on Google search engines and also AI search now, because all ChatGPT, they all train their data basically on Reddit content as well. And even though some of them are not disclosing it, but they all do. And the long story short, the reason why I built Red Reach is because I was doing Reddit marketing for HelpKit in a very manual way. I was basically using a free tool called F5bot, which is like a little Reddit keyword tracker where you can plug in a keyword and then it would find you Reddit posts that are some sort of related to that keyword. And then the idea is you go into these comments and do these posts and then subtly promote your product. However, all of these keyword results, these notifications were false positives, like 98%. And I saw this and I'm like, there must be a better way. There must be a way of just crawling through Reddit, finding relevant posts for your business that are actually, relevant to your business. And then obviously AI came across. And so I was like, okay, I need to build some sort of mechanism that uses AI to filter out all the posts that are just relevant to your business. So what Red Reach does, basically in short, is You go to the website, you give Redreach your website URL, 3 of your competitors, and that's it. Redreach will then go out, fetch your website data, finds out what your website is about, who your customers are, your competitors, and then it will basically find you highly relevant Reddit posts for your business where you can go in and actually subtly promote your product. And now the added benefit of the way how Redreach works is that it not just crawls through Reddit, but it actually crawls through all of the Google search results. So the Reddit posts that Redreach actually highlights are Reddit posts that are in the first top 5 SERP results. And so what that allows you basically is to prioritize the posts that actually get views for keywords that you might not even be able to rank for. So if you have a highly relevant keyword, like let's say you have an email marketing software and people type in Google best email marketing software, there's no way you can rank for this keyword, unfortunately. But the top 5 results, there's probably 2 Reddit links. So in these Reddit links, you want to be present. And that's what Redreach basically highlights. So it's basically parasite SEO to a certain extent as well for products. And that's kind of like the idea behind Redreach, why I built it. I'm using it for HelpKit and also some side projects that I built. And that is basically the magic of like using, I guess, Reddit for your marketing. And one other side projects, or one project that you mentioned, Film Types, is one that actually made you come across me, I think. Was basically like the step in the door. Film Types is it's a niche website, and it is basically the largest database for like photographic analog film. So what it does is it shows you all the still available analog film stocks and film cameras that are out there. So the reason why I built this website and why it's maybe, some sort of weird niche, I guess, is that when I started photography, when I was 16 years old, I came from like a skateboarding, snowboarding background. And back then it was very hipster and cool to not buy a digital camera. Nobody was like, even though, it was like 2014, 15, everyone was like rocking digital cameras, but it wasn't cool. Everyone was shooting analog. So I randomly just stumbled into this aesthetic of analog pictures, and found out how cool they actually look like. And I wanted to replicate it. I tried it with some apps. It didn't really work. And I'm like, okay, actually, I realized you can actually make, physical photos with chemistry. And once I learned about this, I got so deep into this. I completely I bought books. I learned about actually, like the chemistry behind analog photography. I built my own darkroom. I still have a darkroom in my parents' basement, and they hated me for it because it smells like chemicals. And I mean, most of these chemicals are probably expired already and like highly flammable. I don't even want to think about it. But anyway, I got so into this niche that I thought there must be a way to find out about how these analog film stocks, because they all look different. They have a different color characteristic, how they look different. And I was looking for a website and I just couldn't find it. I was going on Flickr. For those of you who don't know, that used to be or still is an image search engine where people would upload their own images. And I could find some pictures on Flickr of people like using specific film stocks. And then I used the Flickr API basically back then to, for every individual film stock, show you the related outcome pictures of how they look like. And that's what got Film Type started. And it got a lot of traction in the beginning. I was mind blown. It was the first like website that I built and designed. And I remember I posted it. So I launched it on Twitter. I had like 8 followers on Twitter, so obviously nobody gave a damn about it. Like I showed it to some friends, and everyone was like, "Yeah, whatever." And I also was like, "Yeah, So I launched it on Product Hunt, and on Product Hunt, it just got 40 upvotes. Like nobody really. Some people were saying, "Oh, that's so cool. My grandpa used to shoot with these," And I was like, "All right." But I was like, guys, this is way more cool. It's like modern, but for old school stuff, and like it helps you. And I go to bed, I wake up, and suddenly like the top four news paper magazines for photography, like DP Pixel, and I even forgot most of the names, to be honest. They have like millions of like readers every month on their online magazines. They started posting like full stories on it. Like they found some data, on Twitter, some data on like Product Hunt, and they made full-fledged stories without even asking me. And I go to the website, and it had 100,000 page views in like the second day, and I just could not believe it. And everyone was so hyped. I launched it on Hacker News. It got on the top ranking, like on the front page of Hacker News. So people were reminiscing about the old days, and they were like talking, "Oh, analog photography, yada yada. It's so cool." And I was so hyped. And for a second, I thought like I'm gonna become a millionaire. I'm gonna monetize this site, and this is gonna be the way how I was like, this is too easy. I'm gonna be a millionaire with this. And then I look at the website and I'm like, but how do I monetize it?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so what is there to monetize? I mean, I guess I could use Google Ads, but first of all, you would need to apply for Google Ads, and they only accept you if you have like a record of monthly page views per month. Like you would need to actually like for the display ads, you would have to have some sort of like credibility already, which I didn't have. And then I'm literally looking at the website. I see the traffic, and I'm like, okay, how like what am I doing next now? Everyone loves it, but I also kind of maybe want to make money with it. And then I tried a lot of things, and to be really honest with you, Jared, I none of them really succeeded. I think in total, like the website made, I think must have been like maybe $500 in the like course of the like 6-7 years, um which I guess is nice. It sort of paid for the hosting fee and some other stuff. But in general, it felt so hard to monetize it. I had phases where I was so desperate because so many people loved the site, but I just couldn't find an angle to like really extract, I guess, monetary value out of it. There's a whole idea of like, a whole argument of, keep things cool, keep it a hobby project. You don't need to monetize all of it. But, we are like business oriented.
Yep.
This is like niche pursuits. I think we all know that there is a way to get there. And I still think there is a way for film types, but I just could not find it yet.
I mean, I almost, well, first off, my first career was photography, so I have a special connection with
And
your
economics now.
I know.
That's
You and I have a lot in common as we've learned in this hour together. So I loved it. I grew up. I mean, I was a professional with film for the first couple of years of my career, and then transitioned in. I'm looking over this. I'm just nerding out, having a good time. I'm on a Fuji Velvia 50 page. I used to love to shoot with that on my little trips and stuff. So it's a great site.
Ooh.
I almost feel like it brings the interview full circle, because here you have this story of crazy success of this website going viral. I mean, really, it went viral. It was the darling child of a niche for a period of time, and yet just sharing candidly about the struggles to monetize it. And on the flip side, we spent the entire first 2/3, 3/4 of the podcast talking about something that you never described a story of virality. You never described how it's gone huge, but yet it is the SaaS that has become the platform that has given you so much success. And so I just think it's such a great full circle story in the life of an entrepreneur, of an online marketer, of an indie hacker, exactly all these terms you talked about. And it was really great hearing from you. I'm sure we could have gone many more hours, but I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story and all the tips you shared along the way with each of these projects.
Yeah, I think you summarized this really, really well. Sometimes I think you just gotta realize that like there's always a reason for the projects that you're building at the given time. And even if your first few projects don't succeed, and to be honest, the chances of your first few projects not succeeding is extremely high. Never get discouraged by like some sort of failure. And also the sort of like if you spend too much time on Twitter or all these like blogs where you see people with huge success, you will think it's super easy. And it's all just survivorship bias. You know, the people you see that are the loudest are the ones that survived. But for every one loud, you know, like, oh my God, I made like 10K this month with this like one post, there's like 100 other people that, you know, you will never hear about. So don't get discouraged, I think, is like the most, and try a lot of things, you know, throw a lot of things against the wall, see what sticks. Don't get like, I see this with so many people that are very passionate about something, and that is great. But if you're in this for also eventually making a living, and I think that's the beauty of this, like for real, if you don't want to treat it just as a hobby, you really need to be able to also move on, keep it as a side, you know, like I have film types been running for 7 years now. It's like it's still available. Some people, you know, like I get all these happy emails from people that say it's an awesome site, yet still it's obviously not paying my bills. But you know, maybe one day, who knows, you know, serendipity, who knows. One cool thing was that like Microsoft actually like backlinked to it a while ago, because they were talking about training their models for like AI, like their AI models on like film stock data or something. So I don't know, it was a cool thing. What I'm saying is, don't get discouraged. Maybe move your project to the side. You don't have to kill it entirely if you're too attached. But try a lot of things and see what sticks. And I think that's the way to go.
Well, Dominik, thanks for joining us here on the podcast. Really appreciate everything you had to share. I'm sure we'll talk again, because it sounds like we have quite a few things in common. But until we talk again, it's been great having you. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me, man.
Hey everyone, Spencer here, founder of Niche Pursuits. So you probably know the importance of building internal links so your site can perform well in Google. Today I want to share how Link Whisper can help you add outbound internal links to your articles. As you draft your article in WordPress, Link Whisper scans your site, identifying the best internal link opportunities. It then recommends the perfect anchor text and link to add. With just a click, your content is updated with new internal links. No more expensive tools or tedious manual site searches. Link Whisper does the heavy lifting right inside the WordPress editor. Say goodbye to the hassle of internal linking. With Link Whisper, you can focus on what you do best, creating great content. Use the coupon code PODCAST today and get $15 off. Elevate your website's internal linking with Link Whisper now. Building smart internal links just got easier. Go to linkwhisper.com today and be sure to use coupon code PODCAST to get $15 off.